Alright, so you'll notice here we have a right triangle. That means we can use things like the Pythagorean theorem and the definitions of trig ratios. So, all I have is that this is a length of 30, 75 degrees, and it's a right triangle, which is of course 90 degrees. So the first thing I could do is find this other angle. So 180 minus 90 minus 75, there are going to be 15 degrees left over. So that's that angle. Okay. Now to find these other sides, I'm going to use, for one of them at least, the definitions of the trig ratios. So let's say I wanted to find this angle right here, this side. Okay, now I can do this a couple of different ways. Let's say I want to use the 75-degree angle. This side would be the adjacent side, and this side would be the hypotenuse, so I could use cosine. Or let's say I wanted to use the 15-degree angle. Now this unknown side would be the opposite from the 15 degrees, and 30 would still be the hypotenuse. So if I'm using the adjacent side, I would use cosine, ca, C-A-H. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so I'm going to do it that way. So cosine of 75 equals something, the adjacent side, over 30. And to solve for that, I just need to multiply both sides by 30. So x equals 30 times cosine of 75. Now, for those of you who are in class today, you know that you can find the cosine of 75 by finding the cosine of 30 plus 45 and using the angle sum formula. But here, it's going to be good enough to use a calculator. So, 30 times cosine of 75 is 7.8. And then for the third side, we could either use another trig ratio or we could use the Pythagorean theorem. I'm going to use a trig ratio. So sine of 75 would be the opposite side over 30. So what I called y over 30, multiply by 30. So y is going to be 30 times sine of 75, which is 29.0. I think that's easier than the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, next. We want to find the area of the triangle in 3B. This one's 3C. Notice the C. So this is on the front. So we want to use, for this formula, we want to use side, angle, side. So the angle between two sides. Notice you've got side A, side B, and then angle C. So it's not across from either one of these. So let's say we use this set right here, the 7, the 6, and the 44. So the area is 1/2 times 7 times 6 times sine of 44. And that's it. You just type it in your calculator, and you get the answer. So 1/2 times 7 times 6 times sine of 44 focus. And we get an answer of about 14.6. Alright, let's do this last one. Now, we start off here with the graph of cosecant. So what we want to do is find an appropriate interval so that when we graph the inverse, we're going to get a function. So it should pass the vertical line test. So recall, when you're graphing an inverse, you take points, say this point right here, negative pi over 2, negative 1, and then you switch the x and the y values. So that would be like negative 1, negative pi over 2, which would be this point right here. Okay, so we're going to do that, and to get an interval that's going to pass the vertical line test after we reflect it, first we want to get an interval that passes the horizontal line test. Okay, so you can tell from the horizontal line test, I can't take one of these entire u's because it won't pass the horizontal line test. That means when I flip it, it's going to look something like this. It won't pass the vertical line test. So what I want to do is only take half of each of these. So that's going to be my interval. This way the graph that I'm starting with passes the horizontal line test. And that way I know that when I flip it to get the inverse, it's going to pass the vertical line test. So I'm going to go from negative pi over 2 to pi over 2. Okay, so we said this point is negative pi over 2, negative 1. And I switch the x and the y values, I get negative 1, negative pi over 2. And likewise for this point, which is pi over 2, 1, I switch the x and the y values, and I get 1 pi over 2, which is going to be up here. And then from each of these, I'm going to have that half of a u. And there will be an asymptote in between. So this is what my graph looks like. This is the graph of the inverse. You can see it passes the vertical line test. And it gives me all the possible values for cosecant, from 1 up and then from negative 1 down. So there it is. If you have any questions, come talk to me. Make sure that you don't only do the corrections, but you also do all of the other stuff that's required for a retake, and make sure you do it before this date, Friday, 4/29. No exceptions. I'll see you sometime before then.